In a sane world, no child would go to bed hungry. Everyone would have a safe place to call home. Nations would no longer be at war to decide whose imaginary friend was the best. And the gulf between the haves and the have-nots would have long since been bridged. Sadly, we don't live in the same world. In fact, with each passing day, it feels like we're living in an asylum in which we've surrendered the keys to the lunatics. We have global leaders depicting themselves as the Son of God, wars being fought over a commodity that is rapidly falling out of fashion, and billionaires looking to colonize other planets by plundering this one. Charity bosses earn hefty salaries while children go without. Pharmaceutical companies charge fortunes for life-saving drugs while nurses can barely feed themselves. And politicians hand down rules that force the elderly to choose between eating and heating. And here in the world of demolition and construction, this crazy imbalance is played out on sites up and down the country on a day-to-day basis. In fact, in this sector, the closer you get to the muck and bullets, the harder the industry's reality bites. This industry is a ladder where everyone is climbing over each other. Yet those at the top seemingly haven't a clue what's really happening at the bottom. The developer has the cash and the vision, but wouldn't know which end of a shovel to hold. So they hire a tier one contractor who promptly carves the job into a dozen pieces and throws those pieces out to the specialists. It's a neat trick. The money stays at the top, but the risk is heavy enough to sink straight to the bottom. We've built a system where money flows up while danger flows down. The tier one contractors sit at the top of the food chain, fat on healthy margins and protected by a phalanx of lawyers. But as the project gets sliced up, the margins slowly vanish. By the time a package reaches the men and women on site, the financial banquet enjoyed by those at the top has been whittled down to a morsel that is barely enough to keep them alive. For a tier one firm, a delay is an inconvenience. For a subbie, it's a direct hit to the jugular. The developer risks a credit rating, the steel erector risks his life. We've created a system where the most essential and dangerous tasks are rewarded with the smallest crumbs and the biggest liability. And if the money is a pyramid, competence is an inverted joke. We've reached a stage where the more vital your job, the more you have to prove yourself to people who couldn't do your day's work if their pension depended on it. A digger driver needs a plastic competence card just to get on site. And that card is bestowed upon him by someone who's likely never spent 8 hours in a machine. It's a culture of box ticking where a person who's read a manual is allowed to lecture the person who has lived the experience. A demolition firm is hired for its ability to demolish, yet they're immediately met by a site manager with zero demolition experience or expertise who feels entitled to dictate the schedule and the methodology. This is the professional paradox. They hire you because they lack your skills, then spend the whole contract pretending they know best. If they actually knew how to do the job, they wouldn't have to sub it out in the first place. And this disconnect isn't just a site problem, it's a national one. We're being governed by people who think they know how the real world works. The industry is buried under a landslide of legislation and safety mandates written by civil servants who moved from private school to a policy think tank without ever getting dust on their loafers. They sit in air-conditioned offices, drafting laws on how a man should hold a shovel, despite never having felt the weight of one themselves. This is the final form of competence inversion. It's no longer just a site manager questioning your method. It's a legislator in Westminster deciding the legality of your trade. When people with zero practical experience regulate those with 30 years of it, you don't get safety, you just get red tape and bureaucracy. The gap between the suits and the boots has become a chasm. For construction and demolition to actually function, we need to stop pretending a degree in management is actually a substitute for genuine lived experience. The money needs to follow the risk, and competence needs to be judged by results, not multiple choice tests designed by a committee of non-practitioners. And until we admit that the person doing the work is the actual expert, the industry will remain upside down. Money and rules at the top, skill and risk at the bottom, and a whole lot of misunderstanding in between.